When I was 7 years old, I was killed by a witch. And not just any witch, but the Queen of the Dead, Black Anu herself. But that was before I walked off the edge of the world, and long before I became emperor in a land of fools, which takes more wisdom than ever Solomon had. Brother Martin dismisses these as nothing but the ramblings of an old man's fever dreams, and has advised everyone he could corner that such ridiculous tales will most assuredly not be included in my official biography, the one he's made sure everyone knows he's writing for Abbot Paul. Such ramblings, he contends, would surely make the emperor appear senile, and with no obvious heir ready to take over, a senile emperor would inevitably lead us down the road to yet another succession war. Here's his plan in a nutshell. He and his cohorts. Yes, there are others. This plot has Abbot Paul's fingerprints all over it, and Martin isn't smart enough to have come up with the idea himself. Anyway, their plan is to convince the men who run the government day to day that I've become senile, and that, purely for the good of the empire, of course, they must appoint a regent. That's why Martin, who's under a vow of silence that should otherwise prevent him from speaking, has become such a master of gossip. He spreads his lies about me under the guise of harmless small talk. That's also why he's filling the biography with the ridiculous miracles spread by the common folk. Miracles that are untrue, but which the people believe, and which aggrandize the brothers. With the weight of the people behind them, the conspirators believe they could control the new regent, or at the very least, they assume they would have much more influence over him than they do over me. So, Midraudius, what would you do if you were on the throne? I'm sure you have some ideas. You always do. I hope you also realize by now that I have a counterplan prepared, as I always do. One that will rid us of this tiresome threat without causing any secondary problems. Yes, as I'm sure you just noticed, I said us. I'm making the official announcement appointing you my legal heir before witnesses tomorrow, and will invent some kind of ceremony for when the council convenes at Easter. They in particular will be happy to have the uncertainty of succession gone. That should piss off Martin and his conspiratorial brothers to no end. Well, I think of it. I'll get Abbot Philip to officiate at your investiture. There's no love lost between him and Paul. Having him do the honors will be interpreted by Paul as a bit of an insult. He is, after all, more senior, so by rights the job should be his. If anyone asks, tell him we chose Philip because he's a kinsman. No one could complain about that. I really didn't want to make the announcement this early. I was originally going to transfer authority over to you in small bits and guide you carefully along the way to the throne. That way, when you do become emperor, you would have the knowledge and experience to keep the empire together. However, there's a lot you need to know before you can become an effective ruler. If you wish to maintain a stable, prosperous land and live a long life, that is. I guess this is where I give you my first bit of advice. Something I learned in Alexandria. Never completely trust anyone. Even me. Or your mother. There are always men around you who will serve you, even serve you well, until they believe they can replace you. And women, too. They're often more dangerous. As I like to put it, ambition makes everyone think beyond their abilities. Remember that. And this applies doubly to the clergy. No, not all of them. Not all men and not all women either. But it only takes one or two to destroy you. And you can never be absolutely sure which one of those around you it is until they make their move. Then if you're not prepared, it could easily be too late. Oh, and on the off chance you haven't figured it out by now, what follows in this manuscript is for you and you alone as my legitimate heir. Back to Martin. As you undoubtedly know by now, he's one of that small but relentlessly growing minority of younger clerics who have enthusiastically embraced Bishop Augustine's predestination heresy that has so captivated the Mediterranean world. Universalists, they call themselves. They're filled with the enthusiasm of youth, but not the wisdom of age, a dangerous combination. What you're not aware of is that I read some of the bishop's writings when I was stuck in Alexandria, waiting for the ship that was to take your Uncle Caius Verus and me to the Indies. Don't worry, we'll get back to this later. At first the bishop's arguments seemed reasonable, if a bit overly strict. But the more I thought about them, the more they terrified me. Augustine, like the rest of the clergy, taught that all people inherited Adam's original sin, and could only be saved from eternal damnation by God's grace. His innovation was the claim that there was only one absolutely sure way to receive that grace. The argument was that God had originally bestowed grace on his disciple Peter. Peter's successors, as bishops of Rome, inherited that grace and could pass shares of it to the clergy, who could pass it on to the people through the sacraments. So the only way a man could truly know he was saved would be to obey the clergy like a slave must obey his master. Following Augustine's argument to its logical conclusion, the Bishop of Rome would inevitably hold more power than any emperor who ever sat in Rome. He would achieve what the emperors never really could. He would be a living God. I'm not sure if the brothers understand the implications. If they did, I would like to believe their support would not be so enthusiastic. But they are, after all, young and inexperienced in the ways that power invariably corrupts every man who wields it, even a living God. These young fanatics were born long after the first succession wars and know little of the ordered life and prosperity that for centuries blessed our island, and which is still the norm in the eastern part of the old empire. They're too young to remember when Londinium was a real city, with bustling docks and an army of merchants haggling over locally produced wares. For them, the world has always been a poor, violent, and uncertain place. In such a chaotic world, or so they argue, the only source of stability can't be found in any government of privileged men. Stability can be found only in absolute obedience to Bishop Augustine's disciplined hierarchy of priests. Yet in the tradition of the great British Bishop Victricius, these very same Universalists see themselves as champions of the weak against an ever-present and growing oppression, advocating the veneration of martyrs who had defied unjust authority and preaching the equality of all men irrespective of rank and station. They have renounced the things of this world as transitory distractions that are irrelevant to their goal of the establishment of God's city here on earth. Disdaining any training in history and the classics as a pagan diversion from the Holy Scriptures, which they claim are the only necessary and proper subject for study, they see themselves as God's soldiers in an evil world. Each day they fight God's war to win souls and defeat an enemy who lurks behind every corner and in every crevice. Doing his work is so important they have convinced themselves that if the result benefits their ultimate goal, lies, treason, or any other crime becomes an act of religious devotion. The irony of defending the weak against unjust authority while advocating the establishment of a greater unjust authority is lost on the Universalists. They place too much faith in men and not enough directly in God. It follows that their fanaticism have made them a dour breed who fast and pray for days on end, punishing their bodies into exhaustion until they see signs of God everywhere. There's little surprise, then, that many of these young monks have chosen to turn their backs on the turmoil and wars of our modern age, while exhorting the rest of us to accept meekly the barbarian scourge as God's judgment for our otherwise unnamed sins. They have the group discipline of a fanatical cult, but lack the personal discipline I have witnessed in the truly religious. Sitting safely in their inaccessible monasteries, conveniently protected from the risk of battle by their vow against shedding blood, it is too easy for them to criticize our refusal to remain idle while thieves and murderers overrun our homes. And if the truth be known, I would wager the sight of a Pictish sword or a Saxon long knife has made more converts than the prettiest of sermons from the mouth of Germanus himself. Like so many other Universalists, Martin is the son of a farmer, with a long-standing distaste for honest work. He finds release from the humiliation and toil of a peasant's existence in an elevated status among the aristocracy of a new Roman Empire. Impressed with his own importance in this new order, he's little more than wind and noise packed in a superstitious bag of spleen. After 4 months of watching Martin work on my official biography, I've concluded that his world is built on images of suffering and blood and deathbed redemption. Life, to him, is a tedious string of mindless cruelties punctuated by the occasional silly miracle that lets him know God is behind all this, still in control, carrying out his mysterious plan that will one day be made clear to Martin if only he perseveres unwaveringly in his faith. Luckily for me, the disdain of classical education that Martin shares with Abbot Paul and the rest of the brothers at the Meadow of Miracles means they are inept amateurs when it comes to the high Byzantine art of political intrigue. They believe that I'm still unaware of their plot to unseat me. They're lax and sloppy because they truly believe that if they were caught, I'd be unable to punish them for their misdeeds. The common folk, after all, are superstitious and think it unlucky to kill a priest, even for treason. Abbot Paul has been counting on that to save the brothers if their plot should fail. The fool seriously believes that if I could not kill them openly, the only alternative would be banishment to some remote corner of my realm. Since many of the clergy seek out such spots on their own, banishment would not be a punishment to them at all. Yet despite their belief that they're safe from me, they'll not escape punishment for their treason. Justice may be meted out in many ways, some of which can be worse than death. My plan to rid the land of these treacherous monks came to me in one of those lucid dreams that I long ago learned to trust. I'll start with Martin. In 3 days he'll awake to find himself penniless and dressed as a beggar on a ship far out to sea. The ship's captain is my man, one of Theodosius's sons, and is under strict orders. Martin will be fed and looked after, but nothing more. All he'll know for certain is that he's on a ship out of sight of land. He may be bright enough to recognize where he is when he sails through the Pillars of Hercules. Then again, geography is one of those useless subjects he refused to study. The ship will continue to sail east for several days along the Mauritanian coast. Then one morning, when the ship's close in to land and preferably far from the nearest town, 2 burly crewmen will approach Martin from behind and toss him overboard. He'll be the proverbial stranger in a strange land, with only his wits for survival. The Mauritanians and Numidians follow the teachings of Bishop Arius, who was declared a heretic by Rome. Thus they'll have literal tolerance of yet another foreigner come to show them the error of their ways. Without the support of his fellow monks, without the protection of his clerical garb, and with a hostile populace, Martin's fate will truly be in his own hands. If he's as arrogant and condescending in a foreign land as he has been in our land, he'll greatly compound his own problems. Yet if he keeps his vow and follows the rules laid down by Abbot Paul with humility and charity, he could do well. Upon his return, the captain will carefully spread stories of the monk who furtively booked passage on his ship and of the mysterious bundle that was never out of his possession. There was, of course, no such bundle, but if I know Abbot Paul, he'll carry out a meticulous search. The monks are exceedingly careless with their possession, and, truth be known, not a few of them have sticky fingers despite their vow of poverty. There will most assuredly be a number of missing articles. Paul will attribute their absence to Martin. Given time, the story will grow. Thus, even if Martin should accomplish the improbable and make his return to this island before I've dealt with the rest of the brothers, he'll find that he has been branded a thief, a rogue priest. Paul and the rest of the monks from the Meadow of Miracles will likewise eventually be deposited at various spots along the Mauritanian coast. The brothers were correct when they concluded that I would banish them, but they lacked the imagination to anticipate how and where. That's the kind of justice I find infinitely more satisfying than having to deal with an inconvenient pile of corpses. Sestos, God rest his Greek soul, would have applauded my solution. He loved good irony, and the thought of my banishing the brothers to a remote spot in a way they could not anticipate would have tickled him to no end. The brothers' disappearance will be explained by the announcement that to honor the adoption of you, Madrautius, as my heir, and to fulfill a pledge to God, I have funded a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for all the brothers, which in a way is true. They're halfway there. By this time next year, I'll have rid our island of those troublemakers. Eliminating a handful of treasonous monks, however, won't restore order, nor will it stop other followers of Bishop Augustine from coming to our land. Although there are as of yet few Universalists here, Abbot Paul and the brothers aren't totally alone in their dislike for me. A few others among the younger clergy in particular look upon me as their enemy, despite the fact that I've been chosen by God to be their emperor, despite the fact that my life is surrounded by miracles, and despite the fact that I've dutifully made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, which none of them have done. They don't like me because I don't recognize their supposed godliness and fawn all over them, as many nobles do. I don't shower them with wealth and privilege. I don't trust them and refuse to seek their counsel in affairs of state. I will confirm no large grants or bequests to them. Most of all, I don't accept their argument that their property belongs to God, especially when it adorns the inside of their money boxes and not his. As I told Abbot Paul, if the money was used to help the poor, I would exempt them from paying taxes. This was a reference to the way the money they do collect is used mostly to curry favor with the nobility. Abbot Paul justifies this practice as being a more efficient investment of their limited funds. His reasoning is that the nobility have more control over the lives of the poor, and persuading them to perform acts of charity accomplishes more than helping the poor directly. My position is that I've seen no increase in charitable acts from among the nobility, but I have seen more gifts go to Abbot Paul. The brothers are, after all, equally protected by the army and enjoy the king's peace the same as any other citizens. Therefore, since they have money to waste on gifts to the rich, they can pay equally for its upkeep. There's something disquietingly hypocritical about priests with full purses exhorting the rest of us not to lay up earthly treasures. I will not exempt those who are able from paying their fair share of the taxes needed to protect them from the barbarians. That they will never forgive. The older clergy, along with the vast majority of hermits and brothers, have not succumbed to Augustine's reasoning, nor do they find the war tax onerous. They still follow the old way of compassion, good works, and moderation that have been the hallmark of Christian teaching in these islands since Joseph of Arimathea first brought Christianity to our shores. They look upon these new ideas as another exotic heresy from the Mediterranean, and resolutely follow the traditions that have worked for us so well. Yet I fear that their belief in moderation and the importance they place on individual communion with God will eventually be swept aside by the demilitaristic organization and fanatical devotion of the newcomers. The brothers' timing, I must admit, was impeccable. Our armies have checked the barbarian advances and reduced their numbers, confining them to a few separate regions where they can be watched. And there are no serious contenders for the throne. For now, at least, there's uneasy peace. Unfortunately, the price we've paid for that peace was the destruction of our economy and the learning it supported. So it's become a continual struggle to find capable men to run the government. And when good men can't read or write, I'm forced to allow them clerics as secretaries. Some of these secretaries must be watched, however, for they're all lawyers when it comes to finally interpreting the letter, and not the spirit of the Holy Scriptures. In a twist of logic that should be foreign to a Christian, they see a lie as excusable if the end benefits God's church. Hence they are not above all types of mischief, including altering official documents when it suits their purpose, despite the eighth commandment. For this reason alone, they would be a constant threat if I couldn't rid our land of them. So I let the brothers continue on their course, watching carefully their every move, noting who supported them and how enthusiastically. Publicly, the nobility came as one to my defense. Privately, of course, most of them were genuinely concerned and uncertain what to do. There was much discussion. In the end, the majority decided, out of prudence, to be watchful but do nothing. That truly frustrated Abbot Paul. Now, I've never killed a man for being stupid, although I have had the urge a few times. Usually stupid men don't live long enough to make indulging in revenge worth my while. Besides, revenge is often an expensive way for a man to hurt himself. Thus I have decided to simply ignore Maun and Olwen's part in this conspiracy. They're fools and their part was minor. Besides, I'm satisfied they were not fully aware of what they were doing. Erp, Geraint, and Cool, on the other hand, knew what they were about. They were simply too inept to succeed on their own. For them, it's time to retire from government affairs and enter the cloister under a vow of silence. Abbot Philip wishes to put a new roof on his church. There's a royal forest less than 2 miles away, and in return for free access to some trees, and a donation I would much rather not have to waste, ostensibly to cover the costs, he'll happily accept 3 novices who are, by royal threat, under a vow of silence. Besides, they're free labor for the fields. As an aside, I've known Abbot Philip since he was a child. He's almost 20 years my junior and a distant kinsman, the 3rd son of one of the former city councillors from Wirukanium. He's also very clever, which means he's well aware that to put a new roof on his church will require not just enough wood for the roof, but also for considerable scaffolding and a hoist, all of which will be made from free royal wood. Once the new roof is on the church, he'll dismantle the scaffolding and use it to make other repairs or construct some new furniture, or probably sell some of it. And I have no doubt that he will sell the hoist. With peace comes a bit of prosperity, and with prosperity comes building and repairs. After he's finished with it, it'll fetch a good price. Now, consider. He understands the full value of my gift to him, and he's well aware that I know this too. In the future, he'll be much more prone to side with me in any religious disputes. Deals like this can have a surprising value when you look beyond the immediate cost. Remember that, Madrautius. It will serve you well. It seems I have to keep guiding my thoughts back to the important point at hand. Erp and Cool have ambitious sons to whom I'll pass their estates and confirm their titles. Erp's son is vain and selfish like his mother, and is more interested in luxury than battle, so he'll be no problem. Cool's is a bit more intelligent, and a good soldier. Galerius is his name, if memory serves. I'll have to find a position for him that appears to be an honor, while keeping him close to hand where he can be watched. I might even make him one of my personal bodyguards, with the title of companion. That would be great irony, and I love good irony. But I'd have to keep the joke to myself. And you. Geraint's successor will have to go to a cousin or nephew, provided a suitable candidate can be found. Then again, it might be better if I pass it on as a prize to someone who has been more loyal to me. For now, it'll remain a royal possession. That leaves Ginner. If Ginner were to stand trial, this entire affair would become public. No. Much as I don't like what I must do, Ginner will meet a tragic end defending his emperor from highwaymen. His daughter and his estates will then come under my protection until such time as she should marry. By custom, that means I should find a suitable husband for her. But Akila's influence is strong. At the right moment, I'll inform the young lady that she'll have a say in the matter, as long as she tells no one and the man is acceptable to me. That'll make it easier on me anyway. With the brothers out of the way and those nobles who are most prone to treachery replaced by younger, less skillful men, there should be sufficient time to groom you, my nephew, to be the next emperor of Britannia. I fear, however, it may already be too late to personally teach you all you'll need to know to have a successful reign. So for your sake, and for others who will follow, I'll try to write down everything of importance that I can remember. After that, you're on your own.